They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but my story didn't start in the cold. It started in the boiling heat of the Nevada desert, with nothing but the taste of dust and bitter betrayal in my mouth. I stood there, watching the only life I knew disappear into the horizon, leaving me with a scar that would take 20 years to heal and a debt that would be collected. But at that moment, I didn't know I was looking at my future. I only saw the end. Let's go back. Back to when I was just a shadow in someone else's spotlight. We were driving a beat up 98 Mustang. The air conditioner was broken, and the smell of stale coffee and hot vinyl was suffocating. But I didn't care because we were going to Las Vegas, to the promised land. Marcus was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping rhythmically on the doorframe. He always had that energy, that magnetic pull that made you want to follow him off a cliff. And I was the fool in the passenger seat, holding a thick manila envelope on my lap. Relax, buddy, Marcus said, flashing that $1 million smile that would later fool millions on national television. This is it, our big break once we put this money on the table. The investors will have to listen to us. I gripped the envelope tighter, feeling the texture of the paper against my sweating palms. Inside was $50,000, my inheritance, my life savings, everything my father had left me before he passed. Are you sure about this contact, Marcus? I asked. My voice small, barely audible over the roar of the wind. He laughed, a sound that used to make me feel safe but now haunts my nightmares. Trust me, I know people. You handle the music, I handle the business. That's the deal, right? Right? That was the deal. I was the talent. He was the face. I was the workhorse. He was the showman. I looked out at the endless stretch of sand and cactus passing by, feeling a strange knot in my stomach. Not excitement, but warning. A primal instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I ignored it. I looked at Marcus, at his sharp jawline, his confident eyes, and I told myself I was just being paranoid after all. We were best friends, brothers. He wouldn't hurt me, would he? But as the sun began to dip, casting long, distorted shadows across the highway, Marcus suddenly checked the rearview mirror. Hey, gauge is low. Let's pit stop, he said, swerving the car off the main highway toward a dilapidated, isolated gas station that looked like it hadn't seen a customer in days. The sign was flickering, buzzing like a dying fly. And as the tires crunched over the gravel, I felt a sudden, cold chill despite the 100-degree heat. I didn't know it yet, but I had just arrived at the scene of my execution. And the weapon wasn't a gun. It was my own blind trust. The car rolled to a stop next to the rusted pump. The silence of the desert instantly swallowed us, ringing in my ears, heavy and oppressive. All right, Marcus said, turning off the ignition, but strangely, leaving the keys in. I'll pump. You run in and grab us some water and, I don't know, some jerky? My treat. He winked. I nodded, unbuckling my seatbelt. The mechanism felt hot against my skin. I opened the door and the heat hit me like a physical blow. Sure, I said, stepping out, my legs stiff from the long drive. I started walking toward the small, grime-covered building, but then I stopped. The envelope, the money. I should take the cash, I mumbled, turning back. Marcus was already out of the car, leaning against the pump, watching me. His eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, unreadable. "Don't worry about it," he called out, his voice too casual, too smooth. "It's safe here. Who's gonna steal it? The coyotes? Just go. I'm starving." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the open window, looking at that envelope sitting innocently on the dashboard, right where I left it. "Go on," he urged, a slight edge of irritation creeping into his tone. "I want to get to Vegas before midnight. I didn't want to be the difficult one. I didn't want to be the guy who didn't trust his best friend." So I pulled my hand back. "Okay, okay," I said, forcing a smile. I turned my back on the car, on my future, on everything I owned, and walked toward the glass door of the station. The bell chimed as I pushed it open, a cheerful little ding-dong that sounded ridiculously happy for such a grim place. The air inside was stagnant, smelling of floor wax and old grease. I walked to the cooler, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the world. I grabbed 2 bottles of water, the condensation cold against my fingers, a stark contrast to the heat outside. I grabbed a bag of jerky, my mind already rehearsing the pitch we would make in Vegas. But then, through the dirty glass of the storefront window, I saw movement. Sudden, sharp movement. Marcus wasn't pumping gas. He was back in the driver's seat. The door slammed shut, the sound muffled by the glass but unmistakable. Thud. My heart skipped a beat. A single, violent stutter. Why was he back in the car? Maybe he forgot his wallet. I moved to the counter, but the clerk wasn't there. Just an empty space. I looked out the window again, and that's when I heard it. The engine, roaring to life. Aggressive, loud, impatient. "Marcus," I whispered, the water bottles slipping from my hands, hitting the floor with a heavy plastic thud. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran, pushing the door open so hard it nearly shattered. "Marcus!" I screamed, my voice tearing at my throat, running onto the gravel. But the Mustang was already moving, kicking up a storm of dust and pebbles, hitting the pavement with a screech of tires that sounded like a demon laughing. He didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. He just floored it. The red taillights burning into my retinas, getting smaller and smaller. "Wait!" The money. "Marcus!" I sprinted, my lungs burning, my shoes slipping on the loose rocks. But a man cannot outrun a machine. I watched, helpless, frozen, as the car became a dot, and then nothing, just shimmering heat waves rising from the asphalt. The silence returned, heavier than before, crushing me. I stood in the middle of the road, hands shaking uncontrollably, chest heaving, waiting for the brake lights, waiting for him to turn around, waiting for the joke to end. "Come back," I whispered, the words turning into dust in my mouth. "Please." But the horizon remained empty. I reached into my pocket for my phone. Empty. I had left it charging in the center console. I checked my back pocket for my wallet. Gone. I had tossed it in the glove box for comfort during the drive. I had nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just the clothes on my back, the burning sun, and the crushing realization that the person I loved like a brother had just left me to die. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. Not from fear, but from a sudden, terrifying clarity. I wasn't a partner. I was a payload. and he had just dropped the dead weight. I fell to my knees, the asphalt burning through my jeans, and let out a scream that no one heard, except the desert. That was the moment the old me died. The nice guy, the trusting fool. He evaporated right there on the highway. And as I stared at the empty road, a new thought, dark and solid as a rock, formed in my mind. I will survive this. And when I do, he won't see me coming. But first, I had to figure out, how long could a man survive in this heat without water before his mind started playing tricks on him? I walked, one foot in front of the other, a rhythmic, agonizing shuffle against the grain of the asphalt. The heat wasn't just in the air anymore. It was inside me, cooking my organs, drying out my tongue until it felt like a piece of old leather. I don't know how many miles I walked that day. 5, 10. Time dissolves when you are dying. The desert doesn't care about your watch. Every car that passed me was a blur of indifference. I waved my arms, weak, desperate motions, but they just honked or swerved away, afraid of the crazy man wandering the highway. I couldn't blame them. I probably looked like a ghost covered in dust, eyes wild, lips cracked and bleeding. I started hallucinating, seeing water on the road that wasn't there, seeing the Mustang turning around in the distance. But it was always a lie, just like him. Keep moving, I whispered, to the rhythm of my heartbeat. If you stop, he wins. That was the only thought keeping my legs moving, pure, unadulterated spite. As the sun began to bleed purple across the sky, a beat-up pickup truck slowed down. The driver was an old man with a face like a road map of hard times. He didn't ask questions. He just handed me a warm bottle of water and opened the door. I drank it in 3 seconds. The water hurt my throat, but it was the best thing I had ever tasted. "Where are you headed, son?" he asked, looking at my shaking hands. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to cry, to scream that my best friend stole my life. But when I opened my mouth, the words stuck. I realized something then. The old me, the one who shared his feelings, the one who trusted, was dead back at mile marker 42. The man sitting in that truck was someone else, someone harder. Vegas. I lied, my voice raspy, devoid of emotion. I'm going to find work. I didn't tell him I was going to find a monster. I just stared out the window at the darkening desert, knowing that I had survived the fire. But now, I had to survive the ash. And as the lights of the city appeared on the horizon, glittering like fool's gold, I made a silent vow to the universe. I would never be the victim again, but I had no idea that starting over would mean sinking lower than I ever imagined. Vegas, the city of lights, looked different when you were viewing it from the gutter. For the first 2 years, I didn't see the inside of a casino. I didn't see the luxury suites. I saw the grease traps, the back alleys, and the service elevators. I had no ID, no money, and too much pride to call home and admit I was a fool, so I became a ghost. I washed dishes in a diner off the strip until my hands were raw and blistered. I hauled sound equipment for third-rate bands in dive bars, carrying amps that weighed more than I did, breaking my back for minimum wage. While the music industry, the world I was supposed to conquer, happened miles above my head. But I listened. I learned. I watched how the managers cheated the artists. I saw how the promoters skimmed the cash. I was invisible. Hey, you! More ice! They would yell, treating me like furniture, and I would nod. Yes, sir, keeping my eyes down, hiding the intelligence that burned behind them. One night, while scrubbing a bar counter at 3 a.m., a news segment came on the TV hanging in the corner. Rising star producer Marcus Reynolds opens new luxury club. I froze. The rag stopped moving. I looked up, and there he was. Marcus, wearing a tailored suit, holding a champagne glass, laughing with some B-list celebrity. He looked heavier, softer, but that arrogance was still there. It was a struggle. He was saying to the reporter, putting on a fake humble face, I came here with nothing but a dream and a few dollars in my pocket. I built this from scratch. The rage that hit me was so sudden, so violent. I nearly snapped the broom handle in my grip. Lies. Every word was a poison. He built that club with my father's money, with my inheritance, with the life he stole from me on the side of the road. I wanted to throw a chair at the screen. I wanted to run to that club and scream the truth, but I didn't. I took a deep breath, smelling the stale beer and bleach, and I went back to scrubbing. Enjoy it, Marcus, I thought, scrubbing harder, erasing the stain on the counter like I would one day erase him. Build your tower high, because the fall is going to be that much longer. I realized then that anger was useless without power, so I stopped just working and started climbing. But the ladder was slippery, and I had to decide. Was I willing to become as ruthless as the man I hated? 10 years. That's how long it took. 10 years of grinding, of saying no to sleep, of saying yes to every opportunity no one else wanted. I moved from the kitchen to the soundboard, from the soundboard to the studio manager's chair, and eventually to the executive office. I didn't become a star. I became something more dangerous. I became the gatekeeper. I started a production company that focused on authenticity. I had a nose for fake talent and a brutal reputation for cutting through nonsense. They called me the Iron Judge behind my back. They said I had ice water in my veins. They said I never smiled, and they were right. I didn't smile because I was focused. I built a network of loyalty, not based on charm, but on results. I treated people fairly, paid them well, but if you lied to me, if you tried to cheat, you were done, exiled. I created a fortress around myself, a world where integrity was the currency, and I was the banker. I wore expensive suits now, not to show off, but as armor. The smell of old grease was gone, replaced by the scent of mahogany and premium coffee. But I never forgot the desert. I kept a small jar of sand on my desk, right next to my golden accolades, a reminder of where I came from and what I was capable of surviving. One Tuesday morning, my assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, knocked on my door. Sir, she said, holding a tablet. The network finalized the shortlist for America's Next Great Talent. They want you as the guest judge for the finale. The wild card judge who makes the final cut. I took the tablet, scrolling through the names indifferently. Singer, dancer, magician, just names on a screen until my finger stopped. And my heart, my cold, disciplined heart, skipped a beat, exactly like it did at the gas station, named Marcus Reynolds. Motivational speaker, performer, notes, seeking a comeback story, The room went silent, the air conditioning hummed, sounding just like a distant highway. I looked at the photo, older, grayer, desperate eyes hidden behind a bright smile. He was trying to get back in. He needed this break. I slowly placed the tablet on the desk, feeling a vibration travel up my arm. "Is everything okay, sir?" Sarah asked, noticing my pale face. I looked out the window at the city skyline, the city he tried to own, and I finally, after 20 years, allowed myself a smile. "Yes, Sarah," I said softly, my voice steady as a rock. "Everything is perfect. Tell them I accept." I had the gavel in my hand. And the defendant was walking right into my courtroom, but he had no idea that the judge was the victim. He left for dead. I sat in my office, the leather chair creaking softly beneath me, a sound of luxury that felt miles away from the roadside dust. But my hands were shaking. I placed Marcus's file on the mahogany desk, staring at the photo attached to the application. His eyes were still the same, predatory, blue, and full of fake warmth. But the face around them had changed. Gravity had taken its toll. The skin was sagging, the hair was thinning, and was finally getting tired. I read his bio: Marcus Reynolds, entrepreneur, visionary, philanthropist. I let out a dry, humorless laugh that echoed in the empty room. Philanthropist? The man who stole $50,000 from his best friend and left him to die in the Nevada heat? The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive. I flipped the page to his personal struggle section, the part where contestants write a sob story to get sympathy from the producers. And there it was, the sentence that made my blood run cold. "I carry the weight of a lost friendship, a tragedy that taught me the value of loyalty." I stared at the words, the letters blurring before my eyes. He was using me. He was using the memory of the man he killed as a prop to get on television. My chest tightened, a phantom pain of thirst and betrayal seizing my throat. I reached for the glass of water on my desk, my knuckles white, and downed it, forcing myself to breathe. "You are not that kid anymore," I whispered to the reflection in the dark window. "You are the judge." I picked up the phone and dialed the show's producer. "Dave," I said, my voice dropping an octave, smooth and commanding. "About the finale. I have a condition. I want to remain anonymous until the very last moment. Keep me in the silhouette chair. I want my reaction to be authentic." Dave laughed on the other end, oblivious to the storm he was agreeing to. "I love it. The mystery judge reveal. Classic TV drama." "You got it." I hung up, staring at Marcus's picture one last time. "You want a tragedy, Marcus?" I thought, closing the file with a sharp snap. "I'll give you a tragedy, but this time, you're not writing the script." The studio was freezing. They always keep these places cold to stop the hosts from sweating under the lights. But to me, it felt like a tomb. I sat in the center chair, the wild card seat, elevated slightly above the others, but I was hidden. A giant screen separated me from the stage, showing only my shadow to the audience. I could hear the crowd murmuring, the excitement, the electric buzz of live television. "30 seconds to air," the stage manager shouted, his voice cracking with stress. I adjusted my cuffs, feeling the cool metal of my watch against my wrist, a symbol of the time I had mastered, while Marcus had wasted his. The show began, lights flashing, music booming, the host screaming introductions. I sat perfectly still, a statue of judgment in the dark. I watched the first two acts on the monitor. Um, a juggler, um, a singer. They were talented, innocent. I gave them fair scores. But my mind was elsewhere. I was waiting for the main event, and then it happened. And now, the host bellowed, a man who says he has lost everything and is here to win it all back. Give it up for Marcus Reynolds! The doors opened, and there he was, walking onto the stage with that same confident stride. But I saw the hesitation in his step. I saw the way his eyes darted around the room, looking for validation, looking for a lifeline. He wore a suit that looked expensive from a distance, but up close. On the HD monitor, I could see the frayed cuffs, the cheap fabric. He was broke. He was desperate. And he was standing 10 feet away from the man who held his fate in his hands. My heart didn't race this time. It slowed down. Thump, 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 like a war drum. I leaned forward in the shadows, my eyes locking onto his pixelated face on my screen. Hello, Marcus, I whispered into the darkness, my voice drowned out by the applause. Welcome to your trial. He began his act, a motivational monologue mixed with a piano performance. It was slick, processed, designed to manipulate. He played a melancholic melody, his fingers dancing over the keys with a practiced emotion that felt hollow to my trained ears. And then he started speaking. Years ago, Marcus said, his voice trembling with fake emotion, looking directly into the camera. I made a mistake. I trusted the wrong people. I lost my business. I lost my way. The audience gasped softly, hooked by his performance. But the hardest part, he continued, a single perfect tear rolling down his cheek, was losing my best friend, my brother, in a terrible accident. I gripped the armrests of my chair so hard, the leather groaned. Accident. He was rewriting history on national television. He was turning his crime into a tragedy where H.E. was the victim. I play this song for him, Marcus whispered, hitting the final, dramatic chord. Wherever he is, I hope he knows I tried to save him. The audience erupted. People were crying. The other judges were wiping their eyes, clapping for this monster, this liar, this thief. The applause went on for a solid minute. Marcus stood there, head bowed, soaking it in, feeding on their pity like a vampire. Finally, the host walked out, shaking his head in amazement. Wow, Marcus, that was powerful, truly moving. Marcus nodded. Humble, shy, thank you. I just want to honor his memory. The bile rose in my throat, hot and acidic. I had heard enough. Well, the host said, turning toward my silhouette, toward the dark screen that hid me. We have one vote left. The mystery judge, the Iron Judge himself. Sir, what did you think of Marcus's performance? The studio went silent, deadly silent, waiting for the verdict. I reached for the button that would lower the screen, my finger hovering over the control. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold studio air, and exhaled the heat of the desert. His performance, I said, my voice distorted by the microphone, booming through the stadium speakers, was very convincing. I paused, letting the tension build. But there is one problem with your story, Marcus. Marcus squinted at the screen, confused, trying to place the voice. What's that? He asked, his smile faltering. I pressed the button. The screen lowered with a low, mechanical hum, a sound that seemed to stretch on for eternity. The studio lights flared, blindingly bright, cutting through the shadows that had protected me for so long. I didn't blink, I didn't flinch, I just sat there, my hands clasped calmly on the desk, staring straight ahead as the barrier between the past and the present dissolved. The audience was silent, confused, waiting to see the face of the Iron Judge. But Marcus knew. I saw the exact moment the realization hit him. It started in his eyes. A flicker of confusion, then a widening of disbelief, and finally, pure, unadulterated terror. His confident smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. His skin turned the color of old ash. His knees buckled slightly, and he took a half step back, as if the physical force of my presence pushed him. "Danny?" he mouthed, the microphone not catching it. But I read his lips perfectly. "Danny, you're dead." I leaned forward, the leather of my chair groaning in the silence. "No, Marcus," I said, my voice booming through the studio, amplified, clear and colder than liquid nitrogen. "I didn't die. I just learned how to walk through fire." The audience began to whisper, sensing the tension, the electricity in the air that wasn't part of the script. The host looked back and forth, sensing a viral moment. "You two know each other?" he asked, holding out his mic. Marcus tried to recover, his survival instinct kicking in. He forced a shaky, grotesque smile onto his face. "Yes, yes," he stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. This is the friend I was telling you about. The miracle. He survived. Oh, thank God. Danny, old buddy." He took a step toward me, opening his arms for a hug, trying to frame this as a heartwarming reunion, trying to control the narrative one last time. "Stop." I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The command cracked like a whip across the stage. Marcus froze mid-step, his arms falling limp to his sides. "Sit down, Marcus," I said, pointing to the stool on the center of the stage. "We are not friends, and this is not a reunion. This is a sentencing." The silence in the room was absolute heavy. You could hear a pin drop. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Marcus sat down, looking like a trapped animal, his eyes darting to the exits. "You told a beautiful story just now," I began, keeping my voice level, conversational, deadly, about an accident, about a tragedy. I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket. "But we both know that's not what happened on Route 95 20 years ago, is it?" Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "There was no accident. There was a gas station. There was a beat-up Mustang. And there was an envelope with $50,000. My father's life savings." A gasp rippled through the audience. I saw the other judges turning to look at me, eyes wide. "You didn't lose me, Marcus. You left me." I walked around the desk, stepping into the light, closing the distance between us. "You sent me into the store for water, and while my back was turned, you drove away with everything I owned. You watched me run in your rearview mirror. I know you did. Because I saw your eyes. I saw you choose the money over my life." Marcus was shaking his head frantically now, tears streaming down his face. But these weren't fake tears anymore. This was fear. "No, Danny, please. I was young. I was scared. I thought you'd be okay," he pleaded, his voice cracking, destroying his own image with every word. "Scared?" I repeated, stopping just a few feet from him, looming over him. I walked 30 miles in the desert heat without water. I drank from a horse trough to stay alive. I ate garbage to survive the first month in this city, while you. I pointed to the giant screen behind him where his successful bio was still displayed. You used my money to buy your first suit, to buy your first drink, to buy your way into this industry. I turned to the audience. He didn't build anything. He stole the foundation, and then he came here to this stage and tried to sell you my pain as his struggle. I looked back at him, looking deep into his soul. That debt you walked away from 20 years ago, it just gathered interest, and today I'm here to collect. Marcus looked small, shriveled. The charisma completely drained out of him. The booing started slowly. One person, then 10, then the whole stadium. A wall of sound, rejection, disgust. The host looked at the producers, but they didn't cut the feed. This was the most real thing that had ever happened on their show. I walked back to my chair, the Iron Judge returning to his bench. I placed my hand on the red buzzer, the button that eliminates a contestant. Marcus Reynolds, I said, my voice final. Talent is not just about playing the piano or telling a story. It is about character. It is about soul and you. I looked him in the eye one last time. You are empty. I didn't wait for him to speak. I didn't wait for the host. I slammed my hand down on the buzzer. Bzzzzzzzzz. The sound was harsh, ugly, and beautiful. The giant X lit up the stage in red neon, casting a bloody glow over Marcus's face. Security guards stepped forward, not aggressively, but firmly, guiding the broken man off the stage. He didn't fight. He just hung his head, the weight of the truth finally crushing him. I didn't watch him leave. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. The shaking was gone. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The heavy stone I'd been carrying for 2 decades had finally rolled away. I took a deep breath, smelling the ozone of the studio lights. And for the first time, it didn't smell like false hope. It smelled like justice. The show went to commercial. The chaos of the production team swirled around me. People asking questions, producers shouting, but I sat still for a moment longer. I reached into my pocket and touched the small, smooth stone I had kept from that roadside. I pulled it out, looked at it one last time, and dropped it into the wastebasket next to my desk. Clunk. It's over, I whispered to the empty air. I'm not walking anymore. I've arrived.